Welcome to And It's Live, the podcast which dives deep into football's most iconic seasons, stories, and what ifs. If you love football, history, tactics, and nostalgia, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell, and drop us a like on YouTube so you don't miss an episode. Hello and welcome to the main event, the history of the Champions League. This is the final part of our look at 2000-2001. I'm Martin Ramsey, your host, and as always, I'm joined by my two friends, Mr. Adam Thornton. How are we, Adam?
Very good, thank you, Martin. Looking forward to this one.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in here. David, how are we?
Oh, very, very much the same as Adam here. There's some big teams, some big ties, and some, quite frankly, enormous football shots.
Yeah, that hasn't yet changed.
If anything, they're getting bigger.
They are, yeah. But great sponsors, I think that's my kind of takeaway from this. Very commercialised. The bubble's just about to bust, as we mentioned last week. Let's start with United and Bayern Munich, because, of course, that was the final only a couple of years before this showdown in the quarterfinals. The game at Old Trafford then, David, tense, edgy, nip and tuck, and then Pablo 𝐿𝐵𝐿 scores a very Bayern Munich goal, really, is the only way I can kind of describe it, with only a few minutes left, and away goal still very much in vogue at the time. And I didn't see any way back for United. There was going to be no 𝐼𝐿𝐵𝐿𝐵 moments, I don't think, in that second leg, even though, it was still another 90 minutes to be played. That was a killer.
Yeah, it was. And it was an incredibly tense game from about the 10th minute because, both sides obviously have a lot of respect for each other, understandably so. I don't know if maybe because the commentary refers constantly back to 99, I don't think it's as big a factor in their minds of the Bayern players as maybe United would have liked it to have been. The scar tissue, if it's there, it seems to have been covered over quite successfully. But as the game goes on, and this, we've noticed this before, haven't we, about Old Trafford and knockout ties? This isn't the first time we've noticed that if they've not gone off like a train, it gets quiet and edgy, and it gets very quiet and edgy. There's not a lot of goal-mouth action. Both sides seem to be settling in for a 0-0, and when that goal goes in, it pans to the crowd, Martin, and the absolutely horror-struck look on their faces because they sort of knew. But again, this isn't the first time I think we've mentioned this on the main event, that in this era where we all remember United as being free-flowing and swashbuckling, on the nights that they weren't, their crowd tended to sort of go within themselves and start to just make the atmosphere very tense. And Bayern, of course, are quite happy with a 0-0, but they go forward and pinch it. And I was like you, I thought, no, they're not coming back from that. The away goal was just so crucial.
Those Old Trafford games are usually second legs from memory. Monaco, Dortmund, Real Madrid the season before. This one being the first leg was kind of weird. I will slightly disagree with you, David. I think 99 and 2000 is very much at front and centre of Bayern Munich's mind this season. They are on a revenge mission.
In a positive way, yes, you're right.
But what they're not letting it do is become neurosis. They are using that as fuel, as big, proper clubs do. The celebrations at the end of that first leg, Adam, were not the normal celebrations at the end of a still finely balanced, halfway stage of a tie. The match is less finely balanced in Munich. Bayern are fairly quickly 2-0 ahead, but United do get back into it. Who scores that goal? 𝐼𝐿𝐵𝐿 just after half time. And what I'd forgotten about is, it's 3-1 in aggregate. Away goals have been cancelled out. Scholes has two brilliant efforts, I think. Definitely one from long range that were very close. 𝐬𝐿𝐵𝐿 should have had a penalty. I'm pretty sure he was tugged back. This could have turned into that dramatic reenactment of the Nou Camp. But there's something about this Munich team that was not happening. Roy Keane gets bounced by Stefan Effenberg. There's just something different about this team, who are hell bent on winning this Champions League.
Yeah, I think it was like you said, they're using that as fuel. I think they were lethal when they needed to be. I think in this game, they in this tie, they missed a few chances. I mean, they get that goal in the last 5 minutes or so at Old Trafford, which is fair enough, like you said. But then within 5 minutes of the first 5 minutes of the return leg, they're 2 up. I like the away goals. I was a big fan of away goals. I didn't want them to go away, but then at the same time, I don't really feel like we've missed them either. If that makes sense.
We've got something different now, which in and of itself it has its merits as well.
Yeah, it's one of those strange ones. I think there's pros and cons to both of it. But they could have been 3-0 up. I watched most of this game. They could have been 3-0 up. 𝐼𝐶𝐬𝐿 hits a shot off the bar. Wes Brown, that 17 minutes in, I think it was, that header back to
awful
to Barthez, and 𝐼𝐶𝐬𝐿 didn't really do very well. But then again, Mehmet's goal, that man pops up 5 minutes before half time to bury it, I think, as far as anybody's concerned. But yeah, that goal that they get back for enough, you might think they could come back into it, and they've got that little bit of jeopardy because of the away goals there. If they get 1 or 2, then they're Bayern are fighting for it. But yeah, I think lessons learned for them. Lethal here. A much better team, I think, now, Bayern, than they were then. 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐿𝐵𝐿 and Stefan Effenberg as your midfield too. I mean, that's channeling every diehard baddie that's ever been.
I hated Jeremy's, but he was superb.
He was fantastic. He might well be the ugliest superstar footballer that's ever played. But look, I know it's, and I can just see Adam rolling his eyes and saying, "Oh, passion." I don't mean that, but there is a sense that the Bayern players are a wee bit hungrier for this, and there's a crispness and a sharpness to them that isn't quite there with United, and that's why I was really interested to, for you, to the point you made, Martin, about Manchester United's league season sort of petering out a bit in their last 10 games or so, because they've done it. And
they won 3 out of the last 8 league games. They lost 4. You know what I mean?
There you go. And they still won by 10 points. I think that it just, Adam mentioned it there, you can't bank sharpness, can you? You can't bank intensity. You either have it or you don't. And this Bayern team, for the reasons that you mentioned, because they're a proper big club, and when they lose a match, they see it as a slight, and they want to go back and make the other team suffer the way they've suffered, rather than going into their shells. Over these 2 matches, there really is a clear difference. And as we've mentioned before, Ferguson, this is the game, this is the last time he'll go with a 4-4-2 trad United, Veron, etc. All of that is going to happen, and United are going to go a totally different way, because he's fed up. We mentioned earlier about how impatient he is just to get to this stage of the tournament, and he's fed up getting there and going out.
I wonder, and this is just speculation, Adam, but if Ruud van Nistelrooy doesn't snap himself in that summer of 2000, he arrives at United as planned, whether that gives him an extra bit of something that wakes things up a wee bit, sharpens things up a wee bit in Europe. I don't know. Go back to your point a minute ago. See if that match situation is the same. 3-1 to Bayern on aggregate with 40 minutes to go. At 1999, United do find 2 goals. They draw that 3-3. They or whatever the ties 3-3 in aggregate, and United go through in away goals. They will find a way that I just don't think they can discover. They can't drag it up. It's just kind of it's lost, and probably need another. We'll talk next week about Ferguson's proposed retirement, and maybe that given a new impetus in terms of the Champions League. But it's just not there. But I wonder if Van Nistelrooy gives them that. Or could have given them.
I think that's a really interesting point. It's not something I'd really thought about before, but they don't score.
Couldn't hurt, could it?
Yeah, absolutely. But they don't. I was going to say, not that they don't score a lot of goals, but they don't have a lot of goal scorers in this year compared to compared to years gone past, I mean, Teddy Sheringham's the only one that gets over 20 goals in all competitions, whereas you look back the year before and you've got Solskjaer popping up with 15, Dwight York 24, Andy Cole 25. All three of them don't get anywhere near that in this year. So while they're all still there, and I guess it'd be interesting to see who went or who won. Having someone like Van Nistelrooy coming in there just to get them over the line in certain games, you know what it's like. I think that would have been something that's quite interesting. It feels really funny to talk about United not having a lot of firepower around about this time, but it is maybe just one of those little transitional seasons before they manage to get him in the season later, isn't it? So that's a good shout.
What he would have done, Martin, because Ferguson himself said this, Gary Neville has said this, when a player of that quality arrived at United, everybody else went up 10%. And to your point earlier, I think the problem is from that 99 season, a lot of them have gone down 10%.
Yeah, you sometimes you just need to do something, kill an admiral and all that. The holders, Adam, Real Madrid are drawn with Galatasaray. They go to Istanbul and they go 2-0 up. Job done, quarterfinal, first leg, but the Turks managed to turn the game around completely. They end up winning 3-2 on the night. Our boy Super Mario with the winner with 15 minutes to go. It isn't enough in the end. They go to Madrid, and I mean, the game's done at half time. Real Madrid are 3-0 up. Raul's got a couple. Your boy 𝐵𝐻𝐵 getting one of his Champions League goals as well. Just they needed a bigger lead, really, didn't they? And in that sense, and maybe that game, that first leg in and of itself was a kind of cup final for them because they just didn't have anything left after that. Yeah,
I think it's maybe not. I'm sure it's still not a very nice place to go now, but I think back then this was proper. Galatasaray were at home, very, 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 very much favourites against most teams, but like you said, they probably do need two or three goals because they weren't terrific travellers at this stage. I think they had loads and loads of decent success at home, but it wasn't going to happen. So I think when that comeback happens, it's going to be very difficult for them. They did have Marcelo 𝐼𝐶𝐿, I guess, at this point as their coach, but and they were lots of fun. They were scoring goals, but I think if you look through it, most of those goals are coming at home. So and similar to that game, you look at it and you think, right, okay, 3-2, we came back and we've won 3-2. That's great. We're through. Let's get to Madrid. Let's just try and keep it as tight as we can up until half time, see what happens, and then they are done by half an hour gone. You'd probably argue they're done by when Raul scores. I can just imagine what the Bernabeu's like at that point when they get that goal. They think, right, fuck it, here we go. We've got an hour and a half. Let's see how many we can get in. I think that's one of those things I always think is quite underrated when you've had a really difficult game, I think, and you come in and you say, we need to get an early goal, and then you get the early goal and you're like, yes, brilliant. The one I can remember the most is when we won the league, number 55, was it St Mirren who scored first? I can't remember. Was it Hadji that scored first, or did Hadji score one later on? And you think, right, just get a goal and we can enjoy it, and then you get the goal and you're like, brilliant, happy days. So I can imagine that's what they were like.
Adam, or David, I'll come to you actually, because Adam mentioned about away goals and he quite misses it. I'll tell you the perfect scenario for me is when the first leg is 2-1 to the home team and the second leg is tense as all hell because the home team have got that away goal in their pocket, but the visitors have something to go and if they score first, the game pretty much is done. And that's kind of what we had with Arsenal and Valencia. I'd put Valencia ahead at Highbury, but Arsenal had a couple of goals and 2 goals in 2 minutes, I think. Thierry Henry and Ray Parlour, who come up with more goals than people remember, I think, for Wenger.
They very much did. And
the game in the Mestalla, which is an incredible stadium, incredible noise, is tense, but the game gets on and time ticks on. Arsenal have got their chances to put it away. It doesn't happen, and big John 𝐾𝐻 pops up with the only goal, and Arsenal go out in away goals. And again, there's just a lack of, and I think one of Adam's kind of pet hates about Arsenal during this time. There's a lack of nous actually around finding their way around this tournament, but it was still made for exciting viewing for a neutral.
I think Arsenal are possibly the biggest underachievers on the European stage in football history, really. And this is another example of it. Now, I've sung the praises of Valencia. They are a terrific side. They really are. But firstly, not really capitalising, because see when that second goes in at Highbury, you mentioned the atmosphere in the Mestalla. Highbury is going insane at this point, as you know will happen in a big match when you get the comeback and then one straight away. And Valencia are rocking, and United and Arsenal don't quite go, and there was their opportunity. I think if they've got a third in this spell where it was very possible for them to do them, by about the 70th minute, it's the parlour goals after an hour. By about the 70th minute, it's calmed down a bit, and then of course the fans get nervous that Valencia will score, so you lose that momentum. But the second leg, you're right, was perfectly set up with Arsenal having enough chances. I mean, Arsenal certainly had enough chances to put themselves into a commanding position, but Valencia are, we mentioned in the first show, they signed 𝐬𝐮𝐞𝐭 to give them an extra option, an extra dimension, and he pops up here with a goal. And at that stage, 15 minutes left, you just know that it's done. But yeah, this is Arsenal. There is a lack of sort of nous about. We've witnessed it in the first 2 years at Wembley. There's matches that they've lost there that they were in total control of. We've witnessed, the UEFA Cup in 2000. They should have won that and didn't. And here's another example of it here. And it is the case with them. I can think of a number of times where Arsenal should have been in better positions European-wise than they've achieved, and maybe it's a case of just not having that laser focus that someone like a Ferguson had, where to him being, a European champion or Mourinho was the be-all and end-all, whereas as we've spoken about with Wenger, particularly in this time, he wanted to do it a certain way rather than just do it and do it and do it. But yeah, look, this tie could have gone either way. There's no doubt about it. They're two good sides. But maybe Valencia's experience, it's been a theme of this. The sides who know what to do because they've done it before quite often come through. And this is a Valencia side that are now just so steeped in this tournament.
Not sure if we've had this conversation on this show. In terms of club size, city size, and certainly league size, Arsenal the biggest club never to win it?
You'd have to say certainly the biggest city. Never to produce a champion. Chelsea. Yeah. I would say Arsenal. When you think of some of the periods of glory, they should have done a bit better. And you think of some of the other English clubs who have done so, even Forest or Villa or whatever. Yeah. Even Derby in the 70s. Derby in the 70s.
They're England's third club, right?
They should. Yeah, they should have. They should have won it. They should have won more than they have, and I just the thing that reiterates it for me is that, or rather multiplies it, is that UEFA Cup final. Liverpool definitely would have won that. United, if they got their Chelsea, they would all have won that game. But then they wouldn't have seen it as the be-all and end-all. Whereas Arsenal, I think, just I don't know why, but I just never think of Arsenal as a European giant, despite, as you say, they're quite clearly the third biggest side in England.
Atletico Madrid.
It's even for me that they're not even getting close. Like, I mean, obviously they get the final in 2006. There's a semi-final, wasn't there? Is it 2 years after this? Man U they play in the? Oh no, is it the year that Man United win it? Isn't it? They play Arsenal in the semis, don't they?
No, they played Barcelona in the semis. It was the year that they Barcelona won in Rome. It was 2009.
2009.
Right. Yeah. So, but that's it. Like, there's no other semi-final or final appearances. So I think, in terms of being one of the biggest clubs not to win it, I think definitely. But they're arguably, for the size of their club, they're one of the biggest underachievers in the tournament itself. Never mind just winning it. Which I think that's probably where my kind of flippancy about them is. I'm like, well, we're not going to do anything in the Champions League, so I'm not sort of putting great stock in maybe a great game that they played this season, or a great game they played the season after, because it doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, I just don't. Yeah, exactly. And the way that I think of Liverpool, even average Liverpool sides, because of the track record, but even the likes of Chelsea, in recent years, there is something weird about Arsenal's inability once they get into these stages to, as Adam says, to regularly. It's one thing if you're getting to quarters, and you're getting to semis and finals, and you're missing out, but they don't. So yeah, I mean, given the amount of money that the club has spent, the players have had in the past
It's a
40
history as
years.
well, it's weird that you bet Europe in general, just a bit of a
One European Cup
underachievement.
Winners' Cup.
I mean, yeah, we'll get to Wenger obviously as he develops in those later years, Adam, where he kind of parks winning in any way just for winning with everybody under 5'5" or whatever. But he's such a team here and around this period that he's building, especially the next few seasons. It's an odd one. The other quarterfinal then, again, Rob spoke about this last week, but it's Leeds against Depor. And it's Leeds do their Ellen Road thing, Adam. 3-0, one of those nights. And it looks as if with about 15 minutes to go that Deportivo are going to do their thing and come back from a place of absolute obscurity and absolute nerves being shredded all around Yorkshire on that night. But the Leeds bandwagon rolls on.
Yeah, it's maybe a kind of role reversal of the Bayern Man United one here, and the one's comfortable. But yeah, I think it's probably the perfect team for them to play as well, because I know we're saying Deportivo, lots of fun still for teams. And I know Leeds are newish to the competition at this point as well, but there could have been a lot worse that they could have got, I think, at this stage. And like you said, the damage is done. In that first leg, again, you have to say though, Deportivo getting a penalty in the first 10 minutes, you think okay, maybe, but then the fact it goes on so long, it ends up being just too much for them to do. Their dream is over. Leeds will go on, I guess, to the next stage. But yeah, that'll be their undoing. I don't think anybody can really argue with the result in the semi final. But yeah, good to have them in. Good to chat about them. A really fun team, like we said this season.
It was a stage too far, that semi final against Valencia. Davey, 0-0 on paper, seems like they're still in it. They needed a win because the Mestalla is becoming a really scary place to go, and Valencia just wiped the floor with them. They just had run the race by that point.
They had, and we've spoken so much about it in these three shows about this, the circus really that Leeds sort of became, and then it just collapsed in itself in the Mestalla that night. Again, experience, and this is know-how, to use that word again, nous. This is know-how and nous against enthusiasm and wide-eyed. Isn't this amazing? This is clinical, isn't it? It's kind of what Ham does in the Mestalla. What they do to them in that second leg, it is an absolute battering. To go back to the point that Phil made though last week, Martin, that Leeds team has so many players missing and guys playing different positions and whatnot. It does, as I say, go to this sense of just this car rolling down the hill without a handbrake, and unfortunately it crashes right here.
Sure does. And Valencia in the Champions League final for the second year in a row. The other semi-final is a repeat of the semi-final from the year before, of course, Bayern against Real Madrid. The first leg in Madrid, Adam, proper grown-up football, I suppose. There's only one goal in it. Giovanni Elber, he does well. He does everything he should do. I don't think 𝐾𝐿 is... I don't think that's his best night. I always thought he should have maybe stopped that personally. And it's 1-0 to Munich. Elber scores again quickly in the Olympic Stadium. Figo gets one back, and then it's your man 𝐬𝐿𝐫𝐫𝐤, who rolls it into the bottom corner and kind of keeps Bayern in control. They are on a mission. I'm absolutely convinced of that. A word on Elber, because he doesn't really get quoted when we talk about this period of time, Adam, but he his goals are so important.
Certainly in the later stages here, I think he's been a difference maker, popping up with some crucial ones. Someone that I always quite liked, one of those quirks, I guess, that playing at that sort of high level and not really getting a look in for his national team. I guess when you look at the quality that they've got there, it's quite an interesting one. But yeah, I thought he was a really clever player, quite modern, I guess, even now in terms of how he plays. Probably quite a nice foil for 𝐼𝐻𝐭. We'll come on to that, I guess, when we talk about them in a bit more detail. But yeah, I think you're right. It's not I know they obviously win here, but it's not a vintage couple of years for them. They're better than they were. Certainly a couple of years before. So maybe that sort of does them down a little bit there. But yeah, very, very good player. Scores a load of goals for them. I think he's got in his 6 seasons for them, he must have about 200 goals. I would imagine for them. So he's a very, very important player for them here. But yeah, I know what you mean. He's just one that you still don't really think about as being an elite player of his time, but he certainly was for me. Like I said, he's a big difference in the latter stages of this tournament. He scores both legs of the semi-final against Madrid, and obviously the Man United games as well.
What's he got to do then to be remembered, quoted in just general conversation, not by 3 nerds around microphones doing shows like this? Does he have to do it for the international stage or what around that
maybe
time?
It is maybe it is the international thing. Maybe it's similar to Sonny Anderson. I don't know. Just like again, cult. I feel like he's on a different level to Sonny Anderson in my head. Although Sonny Anderson's Barcelona and Lyon and things, I feel like Elber is probably less of a kind of cult hero and more of a very good player. But maybe it's just at that stage you're sort of passing over. Yeah.
My shout on it is that we need to remember we're British, right? And we're coming at it from a particularly British point of view. The Bundesliga in this era wasn't shown over here. It didn't have its own James Richardson. It didn't have its own Revisitor La Liga. You know, Scott Minto, it didn't have that guy who sat you down and talked you through it, and you didn't learn these people as characters. You knew them as names, and we would see them in the Champions League, but it was difficult to establish a type of relationship. I mean, speak to a guy our age about Fabrizio Ravanelli, right, or a guy a wee bit younger about Fernando Guti or Raul or whatever, and we'll get all emotional and lyrical and and start. But I just don't think the Bundesliga in the UK ever quite had that sort of cachet. Maybe it's a bit different now because it is shown live in the UK, but certainly back then.
I wonder. I mean, we're missing a track. They could have been Tony Woodcock could have been there, Davey, Kevin Keegan, Alan McInally, all having a good blather. But is winning things with Bayern, do they even get credit for that just because they're so powerful in that league in a way that even the great Milan side, they're still having to overcome 4 or 5 incredible teams, blah, blah, blah. I'm not sure. But
Martin, Harry Kane got 44 goals last season, and the entire... That is completely written off in Britain. They didn't win the league, therefore he's a total failure. That's kind of it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Winning the league with Bayern Munich is not seen as particularly difficult, and therefore, the guys who help them to do it don't get that level of respect. The guys who have that level of respect for Bayern are the guys who did it recently in Champions League years, isn't it? It's your Müller and Lewandowski, that type of player, the guys who helped them in a European stage. And maybe because Elber didn't have that defining Champions League performance all night. Yeah. But as Adam said, he was just very, very good at football and scored loads of goals for a huge club.
I think it's the same as PSG now. I think I would suggest in that they've won Ligue 1 more times than anybody else now. Which with 12, however, 12 years ago they'd only won 2. Kind of similar to Lyon in that sense, where now you're getting to the stage, if you don't win the league as the PSG manager,
Pochettino,
you're a joke. you're a joke essentially, and there you have to go. There's no doubt about it. There's going to be massive introspection. Everybody has to leave, and we have to get. I think that's where potentially we're Bayern, and they probably still are there in this stage. It's just because they've had such a period of success, and they've had all those players like Müller and 𝐼𝐾𝐽 and Neuer have been there for the 10, 12 years, whatever it is, in with the bricks, but they've done it on the European stage. They've done it on the international stage as well. That they are more successfully seen, and I think David's point about the football being on TV type thing, I think is there as well. Elber had a pretty good record for Brazil. I just checked it as we were talking. He's seven goals in 15 games, but only played 15 games for them over a kind of 2 or 3 year.
Not enough, is it?
2 or 3 year periods. Brazil had that pretty long. You could probably say it's continued ever since, but from Romario, Bebeto, right through Ronaldo, Ronaldinho, Rivaldo, right up to Neymar, and now Endrick. They've always had that line. If you weren't those guys,
Jardel. How many games did Jardel play for Brazil? You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Well, the only guy I can think of that era who wasn't a sort of major player who was well known was Edmundo, and that was because he got sent off a lot and he got jailed for giving beer. Well, he got jailed for giving beer to a monkey, and the monkey went on a rampage, and he got sent down for it. He was well known in Europe, but not for maybe the right reasons. Although I think anyone who gets jailed for giving beer to a monkey does deserve some sort of respect.
Adriano's another one, but he was. I mean, I thought Adriano was terrific at Inter. He was a player I really loved. Not a player that you ever thought was going to go on and have a really long career. So I think his longevity probably, or lack of it, did against him rather than his talent. But yeah, I think Elber just sort of gets. I think I said it earlier on, for someone else potentially gets lost in the shuffle a little bit. But it's good to give him a bit of love in case he's listening.
Yeah, good for you, Giovanni. So the final in Milan is Bayern Munich against Valencia. Of course, two of the previous finalists, and with something to prove, great narrative, etc., etc. Adam, I'm going to talk about two players. Let's stick with Bayern as they line up, because 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐜𝐫𝐤 isn't there, and they have to opt for an young English player with a weird kind of Canadian voice, Owen Hargreaves. He'd been on the bench quite a lot throughout this campaign, but he starts in this final. A word about him, because he is a decent night, I think it's fair to say, in an unassuming way.
I remember the just absolute confusion. It was as if Germany had invented fire. You're like, what is going on? I don't really understand what's going on here. He's English, but he's not English, but he's playing at Bayern Munich. He's never played in England, but he's Canadian. The only one I can liken it to on a much lower level is Eric Dyer. Remember when Eric Dyer was getting
Sporting Lisbon? Yeah.
Getting talked about, and I was like, oh, there's this player at Sporting, and you go into his Wikipedia and you're like, he's never even played academy football in England. How can you be at Sporting Lisbon? I don't really understand what's going on. That's the only one that I can ever really remember. Obviously, changed days now when there's so many different nationalities. As soon as they hit 18 and they're over, and obviously on the flip side as well, so many young English players going Bundesliga and various other places. But yeah, I remember at that time I was like, I don't understand what's going on here. I liked Hargreaves a lot. I can't claim to have known him when he came through at this point, or paid huge amounts of attention to him when he was at Bayern Munich. But I always feel like he came about at the wrong time, I think, in English national team terms, because you're still sort of battling through the Gerrard, Scholes, Beckham, Lampard kind of era. But I do feel like he was a player that they probably needed at that time, and if they had been a little bit braver's the wrong word, I think.
No, a bit more the right word.
Yeah, just a bit more of an awareness. It's probably quite pertinent to England right now in the Euros that are currently ongoing that we're talking about. If you just maybe took a bit of time to sit down and say, what do I actually need here to get a functioning midfield, rather than how do I squeeze every single player in that is a big player and won't be annoyed. So I think he kind of came around at the wrong time for him, but maybe the right time, and they never used him. So obviously a few years before Carrick really came on the scene. I think he was at West Ham, and it was a couple of years before he would really be getting into into the England squads regularly and making appearances. But again, someone that would have offered a really nice balance. But yeah, Hargreaves at Bayern, you can't really argue, can you? First season, like you said, he'd been there since he was 16 with the B team in the lower leagues, and this first season won the Bundesliga and he won the Champions League in his first year. Only one of 3 English players to win the Champions League with a non-English club. I assume you can name the other 2 fairly easily. But I'll put it out there for listeners as well.
Well, Jude,
yeah.
We had this conversation before, and I've totally forgotten.
McManaman.
Dave McManaman. We've talked about him literally
last week. Yeah.
What I think is quite a quirk about this as well, though, David, is that it's not happened very often, but it was 3 years in a row that it happened. McManaman won it in 2000.
That is cool. I love
Hargreaves
stuff like
won it 2001. McManaman won it 2002, and then obviously the big huge gap to
big Jude.
Bellingham.
But a couple of things about Owen Hargreaves was, I love the way, first of all, when he commentates, he always sounds to me like a little boy who's run back to the village to tell them that the wolf is coming. and I admire his enthusiasm, but he was a very cool footballer, and by that what I mean is he had a composure that you don't always associate, by the way, certainly in this era, with British midfielders. If you think of the midfielders that we would talk about as being great in this period of time, that the British ones anyway, with the exception of maybe Scholes, were very well. Then Scholes and his tackling, he played a much more disciplined and calm and composed match. I think his reputation suffers from, do you remember the comments Ferguson made about him where he said he was the only player he signed that he got a bad feeling from, and he didn't like him?
Weird. I'm not sure.
I think he suffers. I think that kind of stained him a little bit, but he was so good this night. And another thing that I enjoyed about it was for the British commentary team, or let's be honest, the English commentary team, that it sort of gave them something to focus. Almost a step up from a European from an English ref doing it.
Yes, it was like, oh, brilliant. I mean, it's not quite as bad. I think English football's in the Nadir, which was the 2010 World Cup in South Africa, not the 4-1 defeat by Germany. That was bad, but it wasn't quite as bad as the phrase, not tongue in cheek, but absolutely serious. English-born Paul the Octopus. Has not recovered from that particular claim to lame. But Hargreaves, I think English football still doesn't quite know, Adam, what to do with a Hargreaves, and could very much do with knowing what the fuck to do with providing that wee bit of balance. Different when you've got an Effenberg beside you as well. He slotted in quite nicely. 3 at the back, you're not a fan of that?
I'm not. No. Not a fan of that. Not a fan of Bayern Munich. So really, this is a lot of fun.
What about the fullbacks, the 2 French fullbacks? How we live in an age of fullbacks. Where were they in that transformation? 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐜𝐫𝐤 and 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐜𝐫𝐤. I loved 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐜𝐫𝐤. I must admit.
Yeah, 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐜𝐫𝐤's penalty in the finals, an absolute peach. I think there was some nice, sensible signings. I think that they brought in this year. Willy Sagnol obviously isn't going to be as revered as Lilian Thuram was at this time. So there's that. I think on the other side it was Candela, wasn't it? Roma, who was the kind of backup to 𝐿iZaRazu. They're obviously not going to be as highly thought of. But yeah, I thought Willy Sagnol was a decent signing for them. That 5 at the back does work because you've got Thomas Lincoln on one side, you've got Anderson as the kind of stopper, if you like, and then you've got Sami Kaffour, all energy and physicality on the right hand side of the defence. I think it works well, like you said. That midfield too, I think is really of its time, I guess. It gives a nice balance in there, whether it is the kind of 5-3-2 that we see here, whether it's a standard 4-4-2 or whether it's a 4-2-3-1. That 2 in the middle doesn't really change in this era. Everything else sort of changes round about it, but those 2 sort of stay. And I think it is a great balance, as you mentioned there. Playing with Stefan Effenberg must have been such a big help. And then 3 of the front 4, usually Mehmet Scholl, Giovanni Elber, Carsten Janker, or Hassan 𝐼𝐶𝐬𝐫𝐫𝐫, as it was in the final. That's another one I can't get out tonight. So yeah, I think as fun as a German Bayern team could be at this point, I think they had a few players in there who are capable of moments of brilliance. They've still got that brutal efficiency that you would expect from them. But yeah, they were good. Hitzfeld for me, I don't know what you guys think, but underrated.
Very hugely.
I'm going to come to him later. Part of the thought, because I want to come to him at the end. I do want to speak about Hitzfeld because I think it's an interesting moment in time about where his kind of managerial career and where his star was heading and where it didn't really end up, I suppose. Let's talk about Valencia then, Adam. Their style doesn't change. They've still got that diamond, but at the head of that diamond now, mid-season transfer is Pablo Aimar.
Yes, he was someone I enjoyed. I feel like there was 𝐟𝐨𝐫𝐿 vibes from Aimar. He just appears. I think it probably helps as well that he's one of those signings again, to go back to talking about Football Manager. You bring in someone from Argentina, nobody really knows him, and he just ends up ripping up the place, coming into the best team, or one of the best teams in La Liga, and instantly being one of the best players, having played at River, coming in at 21 years old, all that ridiculous curly long hair. He's just one of those players that you can't instantly took a liking to. I always peg him and Riquelme as they kind of appeared at the same time. One came from Boca, one came from River. They both went to La Liga. They both ended up at slightly unfancied teams in Spain. Obviously, Riquelme mostly at Villarreal, despite the Barca thing. I don't know what you guys think. It feels like Riquelme is more fondly remembered than Pablo Aimar. Despite, I mean, Aimar has had a lot more success in Europe. Obviously, he's Valencia, won the league there. He goes on to Benfica. He does a lot. Riquelme sort of bundles about a little bit, and he has that ridiculous game against us, and he plays well for Villarreal. But I don't know, is it sort of Riquelme maybe giving the Maradona vibes a little bit, and of a dying breed this time?
I think it's that with Riquelme, a lot of big performances on this stage with Villarreal in the Champions League, and Villarreal were a side that, because they were a smaller side, that they were such a great story, and here was this guy who was right at the heart of it and absolutely made them tick, whereas I don't think Aimar has really got that Champions League pedigree. You're absolutely right, though. I think most people, if you mention to them about the two players, with Riquelme, they'll go, "What a player at Villarreal," etc. With Aimar, they'll go, "Oh, I remember he flopped at Valencia." So it is it. Whereas they don't go, "I remember he flopped at Barcelona," for Riquelme.
Yeah, I think as well, Aimar, maybe you knew you were getting with Riquelme, Martin. I think you mentioned there, Maverick, number 10, unashamedly, is what he is. Pablo Aimar was, I think, quite modern in the sense that, number 10, but could absolutely play off a side as well, maybe a little bit more adaptable. He's the Argentina assistant manager now, as well, which is always quite interesting when you see him popping up on the bench randomly. But yeah, it's one of those ones. I thought he was really good. I really enjoyed him. I thought he had a really successful time at Valencia. Maybe the fact that he goes on to Benfica and it's kind of not out of sight, out of mind, I guess, as far as the top levels of the Champions League are. I'm not sure, but yeah, he was a player I liked. He added a bit to them this year, definitely, in that number 10 position. They missed, I think, that little bit of guile in the first half of the season with Claudio Lopez not being there. I think Aimar coming in really, really helped them out towards the end of that season. Then obviously the next few seasons when they go on and they win the league, don't they? Under Benitez. So I think he played a really big part for them.
Final itself, not a classic. It's probably fair to say 1-1, both penalties. A very early one for Valencia. Mendieta, who, I mean, I was just besotted with around this time, especially his penalty technique of just looking at the goalkeeper, really, knowing exactly where the ball was, waiting for him to go and just doing something different. Bayern missed a penalty in the first half. It was all penalties, and 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿 has had plenty of plaudits on this show. Not his greatest night, I think it's probably fair to say, in a Valencia shirt.
Are we having that Valencia penalty as a penalty? I don't know.
It's a bit.
I mean, it's a bit much.
We talk about how things are a bit pernickety in the present day. I don't think that's given as I'm not sure what that's given as. Probably just a foul to the defensive team, and everyone gets on with their life just now. It's
I think that the ref, remember, it's a couple of minutes into the match, the atmosphere, the tension. I think the ref sort of runs together. I was cheering on Valencia like Martin. I was Mendieta obsessed, and because Bayern, jammy cheating Germans still left a sour taste in my mouth from previous year. So I was hugely behind Valencia. When they took the lead, I did think, right, here we go, because it's happening, because last year was a non-event. They didn't turn up in that final. They shat the bed against Real, because it was Real Madrid, and they've learned. Here they are. They're going to compete. But then the game, as you mentioned, Martin, it's not a classic, and it gets sucked into this very tense vortex. But especially when Bayern missed the penalty, I thought, right, the gods are with Valencia tonight. When it goes to penalty shootouts, we're still right in the heart of German teams always win penalty shootouts.
Well, I felt exactly the same way when it went to penalties. And of course, Mendieta's first up, Paulo Sergio misses, and you're like, well, could it be? Could it be? And 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿, Adam, it's a left footer's penalty.
Awful.
It's just
awful.
It's rubbish. The two others missed.
I feel a bit for Carboni and his, to be fair, because he just wants to smash it as best he can, but it's just the worst moment, because, like you said, they had a wee bit of a chink of light. Paulo Sergio misses that one. Fair enough. 𝐬𝐮𝐬𝐫𝐿 misses his, but then Bayern miss again right away, and you're thinking, right, just keep your nerve and just get back into it. And he just tries to keep his nerve by smashing it. It's just so unfortunate.
Yeah, it's Pellegrino that misses the 7th Valencia penalty, and Thomas Linker makes no mistake. Oliver Kahn is
a dick.
He is. I mean, this, in case anyone doesn't know, he was asked once to take part in a penalty shootout against a group of 9-year-olds in aid of charity. So any penalty that was scored, the money was donated to charity. He didn't concede a single one. He just could not allow himself to be beaten by kids. And Bayern won the Champions League. The two managers then, Adam, because Héctor Cúper was a bit of a darling. People said, right, okay, Real Madrid, that's Valencia. They've got a complex there. It just kind of fell apart. But Valencia was superb, as we mentioned that season. They've done it again, got to the final. Right, it's Germans, it's penalty shootout. It's that's kind of where it is. He has a career ahead of him. It doesn't really happen.
For Cúper, no, it doesn't. It's a interesting one. I think we mentioned in one of our last ones that he was still managing. I think actually in the time period that we've discussed this, he's since been sacked by Serie Cúper, which is not ideal, but he's still going at the age of 68. I don't know where he'll end up next, but yeah, into Milan for a little bit. Not a huge amount of success. He doesn't do terribly. He finishes third. He finishes in his first season. I think they could have won it on the final day, but they end up losing to Lazio and giving 𝐬𝐵 the title. And then the next season he finishes second. Does get to semi-finals of the Champions League in that season. But yeah, I think it's one of those ones that I don't know how. I'm trying to think of a way to sum him up, because it's an interesting couple of years that he has at Mallorca. He does very, very well, and then Valencia. But I always think when he's went to Inter Milan, it's went okay. It's not went great, but then he just sort of retreated back to Mallorca right away after it. Is it one of those things where your pride's hurt a little bit. You've had a really great time at Valencia. You've went to Inter Milan. It's not really happened, and you've just retreated right away. This is a really bad example, but David, I always remember thinking it with Gasperini when he went to Inter, and it was terrible. And I thought, all right, okay, you're Inter Milan, and then you're just going back to a Palermo or an Atalanta,
a regional club.
Yeah, you're almost like giving up on yourself. Obviously, he's then went on to build something incredible at Atalanta, so it's a bad example. But that way, you just get stung, and you maybe
I
just
think
went
Inter sour people. No, I agree with you. I think Inter have this ability to absolutely sour people, especially an unsuccessful Inter. Look what it did to Frank de Boer's career. I mean, promising young manager, and then now begging for scraps. It's one of those clubs that it's just a very, very difficult place. Benitez, 6 months there, if they're in one of their down spells, they can suck the life out of you, and I can absolutely understand. I'll just go, to use the old line from Cheers, where everybody knows my name, where everybody wants me to be. And I was like you, though, Martin, after 2001, I thought he'll come again. And his career afterwards has been a little straight. I was actually quite excited when he went to Inter, because I thought, yes, here we go, Inter's resources, Cúper, here we go. But I think for your pure coaches, when they go to a club where there's a lot of political interference, and that's very much the case at Inter, then, and I mean like politics from up above in the club, it can be incredibly difficult and disheartening for people.
Adam, the other manager then, Hitzfeld. That's his second Champions League in 4 years. He is one of the most, if not the most sought after coach in football. People are talking that when the time comes that he'll take over from Ferguson at United, that's almost a guarantee. But this is kind of his high point. I think he wins another Bundesliga and another German Cup, maybe another couple of things, but certainly not troubling these heights again. What is that then? Is one of those examples of a manager whose style is right in the mix at that particular time, but things move on and he gets caught out, or again just career choices, or doesn't make the necessary moves. What happened there?
I think it's difficult not to. I know we compared in the previous shows Carlo Ancelotti to a couple of teams. And I think there's a little bit of that there. We're not talking about someone who's a great tactical coach here, and Ottmar Hitzfeld. He's I would say very German and of his time, capable of doing something with this team and getting them to function. But yeah, just for whatever reason, maybe it's we've spoken about Cúper maybe taking a risk there. Maybe Hitzfeld has decided not to. He has this spell at Bayern Munich right in the middle of it just now, and then he comes back to them for a season, and then he goes to Switzerland as a national team coach. So maybe it's just one of those things. He sees himself as the guy at Bayern, and has no inclination to go and try his hand somewhere else. I'm sure he would have had lots of offers, but I still think very, very good coach. Round about this time, did well with Bayern, got the best out of them, got big players playing in a way that made sense. He's still one of only a few to have won the European Cup and the Champions League with two different clubs. Mourinho, Ancelotti, 𝐬𝐿, the Austrian guy whose name has escaped me. Is it Rapid Vienna? Ernst Happel. So you need to give a bit of credit there. I think 2 Champions Leagues with Bayern, 7 Bundesliga titles, loads of other cups and things. A little bit of a dynasty there, I think, and maybe he just gets to a point where he's not getting any younger. I think when he leaves Bayern, he's hitting 60, so it's maybe just one of those things that he's not going to go anywhere. He's maybe not got the appetite to do it. He's quite happy just at the international football. But I think no tactical revolutions here. It is pretty classic, big team, big manager, fair, I think. But he was just able to get them get them playing in a way that made sense. I think I do still think on this one, maybe it's the romantic in me, but I do still think Pablo Aimar did not have a great final, and rather than, he doesn't feel like a Héctor Cúper type of signing, Pablo Aimar. It's again one of those things trying to change, and you maybe change too far, but I feel like he potentially could have found a way to get that to work in the second half, more than it did. Watching it back as well, they had Vicente on the bench, who was very, very highly rated. That was his debut season, and they never really found a way to get him into it as well. You never really know what can happen. So I think it's just a combination of things there. But yeah, certainly two managers that I thought at the time were very, very good. And I was quite surprised to see I guess how Cúper went in his career, but Hitzfeld, I think, went on, had some great success over the next couple of years, and well deserved.
Gentlemen, we've reached the end of another season. It's been fun and enlightening. A lot of things I'd completely forgotten about, and yet again, just starting to fill in nice little links for the wider history of football. Thank you, David.
Pleasure, and of course our next series of pods will be on a final that was coming to Scotland.
Indeed it was. Thank you, Adam.
Thanks, guys. It was a pleasure.
More new faces next season, and the big news that one of the managers of the game was going to retire. He's going to retire by winning the Champions League at Hampden, where he was inspired all those years before. It's a funny old game. Until next time, bye for now. If you enjoyed the show and want to help us grow, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. On YouTube, search for And It's Live Podcast. We've got new deep dives, drafts and breakdowns dropping every other day.